Hello, this is Faria, and you are watching The Inclusive International. Today, we are going to talk about the territorial conflict over the Kashmir region between India and Pakistan. This dispute has taken and ruined many lives, whereas the two nuclear armed neighbors, India and Pakistan, hold each other responsible for the stirring unrest in the region. According to the first ever report by the United Nations carried out in 2018, the UN High Commissioner of Human Rights, Zaid Rad Al Hussein, says that the political dimensions of the dispute between India and Pakistan have long been center stage. But this is not the conflict frozen in time. This is a conflict that has robbed millions of the basic human rights and continues to this day to inflict untold sufferings. To talk about the disputed Kashmir region, which is famed for the beauty of its lakes, meadows, and snow capped mountains, we have invited Shams Rahman, who is a freelance British researcher on the Kashmir issue, and he is also the director of Jammu and Kashmir TV, which is a Kashmir first web TV to promote freedom of free speech in Kashmir. Mr. Shams, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Faria.
So, Mr. Shams, tell us about the history of Pakistan and India's Kashmir conflict. Because at the time of independence, under the partition plan provided by the Indian Independence Act, Kashmir was free to accede either to Pakistan or India. So then what happened? And do you think that Hari Singh is also responsible for this dispute?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Faria. And I will try to be brief because these are big questions, and there is so much to explain these questions. But I'll try to be very brief. And well, from my understanding, the traces of the conflict, which became conflict between India and Pakistan, can be traced back to when in British India, the struggle against colonialism was kind of started dividing on this concept that there is not one nation in India, there are two nations. So this became a kind of popularly known as two-nation theory. And I think it was impact of that thought process, of that thinking, or politics which was linked with that thought, also then affected the situation in Jammu Kashmir, which was also a multi-religious state. Although Muslims were in the majority, but there was significant number of Hindus and other religions. So here, when the first political party was formed in 1932, which was Muslim Conference, but it was moved on to National Conference in 1938 because leadership wanted it to be a secular party rather than a Muslim-only party. So in this environment, when this Hindu-Muslim form of politics came to Kashmir, there was some internal kind of, you can say, internal divide or internal contestation between secular and religious politics, or secular and Muslim politics. So, so in this situation, then, when the British finally decided to leave India, and they gave choice to rulers, or they didn't say specifically the rulers can decide. They said our treaties with all the rulers will be lapsed. And there were two Indias. One was princely, which was ruled by princes, and one was British India, which was directly ruled by British. So Kashmir was one of those states which were ruled by Maharaja Hari Singh at that time. And so Maharaja was actually reluctant to accede either to India or Pakistan because of these internal composition of his population. So he kind of told the idea of remaining independent. And within state, he was introducing democratic reforms, obviously demanded by the newly made political parties National Conference and Muslim Conference. And by 1947, there was also Mazdoor Kisan Conference formed as well. So, and the structure was evolving. The democratic structure, quote unquote, was evolving. And, by 1947, entire assembly was to be elected by people, obviously certain people, not a free franchise, not one person, one vote, but there were criteria of people who could vote. But this was evolving. And then there were forces within the Indian politics and Pakistani politics, which were kind of driven by religious religious zeal or religious enthusiasm or passion, and they wanted to kind of have Kashmir in India or Pakistan. So initially, these were the civil kind of activists, or some of them were armed with weapons, and this politics that Kashmir is ours. They kind of entered Kashmir, and from the Pakistani side, there were people from the tribal areas, and from Indian side, it is said that there were ex-Patiala forces and all those people. They also came to Jammu, and from this side, they entered also Jammu and Muzaffarabad, and went up to Valley of Kashmir. So this was initial invasion, but then that led to the official army's invasion. Indian army came in because Maharaja acceded to India when the state was invaded by Pakistani tribals. So then India accepted that conditionally. But also it's very important to know that till then, both India and Pakistan were actually commanded by British generals. And India was also politically headed by Mountbatten, who was a governor general. So, so in that context, when the invasion happened, then Indian and Pakistani armies walked in as well. And then, case was taken to United Nations, where they both agreed after a lot of discussions that they will withdraw their armies, but they didn't. One blames the other. But armies are not only there, they have grown in numbers more significantly in the Indian side of Kashmir than the Pakistani side of Kashmir. But the forces are currently seen by many Kashmiris as not armies who came to protect them, but the armies of occupation who are making their lives difficult rather than to make it easy. So this is the summary. Yes.
Yeah, so I was about to ask you the same question that, why could not India and Pakistan agree to a deal to demilitarize a region? Because at the time of independence, the United Nations, recommended to hold a plebiscite. So why could not they do it?
Yeah. Obviously, there is a huge subject again, but the gist of it is that Indians claim that Pakistan was supposed to take their army out first before India was to do the same. But Pakistan did not do it, so therefore they didn't do it. Pakistan is saying that we did not do it because after that resolution which said Pakistani will take all army out, there was another one where they agreed that they will leave some of armies there till plebiscite. But Pakistani say we didn't take it out because we knew that India will not. So that kind of blame game continues. However, the fact of the matter is that both India and Pakistan, basically, they needed Kashmir. They need Kashmir, not because of any religious brotherhood or political secularism, a love for secularism, but because of the waters and of course minerals of Kashmir, but most importantly water. And because of that, they both wanted control over it. And water issue was partially resolved in 1962 when the Sintas agreement was signed between India and Pakistan. And they agreed that they will use 3 rivers and they will use so they divided rivers between them, and people, of course, remain divided.
Hmm. Okay, so over the period of time, Mr. Shams, we have seen that there are so much emerging, terrorist groups and jihadist movement Lashkar-e-Taiyiba, Harkatul Mujahideen, and Hizbul Mujahideen. So, what are their objectives, and what do you think? Who is behind them, and where are these Lashkars trained?
Yeah. Okay, very interesting question. Well, it has two kind of aspects. One is that who defines who is terrorist in what context and when, because in occupied lands, people, not only in occupied lands, but where there are suppressive regimes, the people who initially fight against the suppressive mechanism, structure, government, they are usually branded as terrorists by those who they fight against. But if you go by United Nations resolution or United Nations Charter, basically, it says that occupied land are the people who have right to self-determination and are occupied. They have a right to fight using whatever means they can access to, including armed struggle. So that is why there were a lot of armed struggles in different countries till recently. And in Kashmir, the first militant organization was formed on 13th of August 1966 by the name of Jammu Kashmir National Liberation Front. And 13 August is a very significant day because amongst the United Nations resolutions, the only one which was the first resolution by the Commission, UN Commission, says that Kashmiris have a right to decide the future status of the Kashmir. In all other resolution, it says they have a right to decide who they want to accede, whether India or Pakistan. But in this resolution, it says future status. That means they can remain independent as well if they choose so. So that is why I think this date was kind of fixed by Makbul Butt and Amanullah Khan and other people who formed National Liberation Front. So they started it, but then gradually they were seen by both India and Pakistan as dangerous because they were not fighting, for taking Kashmir from one occupier and give it to the other. They were fighting for independent Kashmir, so which was not acceptable to India or Pakistani rulers. I'm not talking about people. And then this organization continued, but in 80s, I think by 1987, the situation was changed. And now within Kashmir Valley, the people who were against the Indian occupation, they were challenging it verbally, now became a significantly bigger force. And when they were kind of forcefully stopped from entering to the assembly through democratic elections in 1987, and then the youngster from different organizations came out to protest against that. And then that was linked with local issues, and that was linked with the self-determination. And from there, then different organizations were formed, small, bigger, and it was very kind of obvious. It became known secret that this movement where people were now using guns, these guns were not from some independent sources, but from the Pakistani side and through Pakistani agencies and all that. So when that became open secret, when people in the world, around the world know that, then the support for the movement was kind of the many democratic parties and people who were supportive of that became reluctant that this might be a proxy war rather than a war for independence or liberation. And but obviously it became then very evident when the heads of Indian and Pakistani agencies, Mr. Durrani and Mr. Dalit, wrote this joint book, which was their interview was then scripted to a book, and they openly told the story what happened. So then on, there were a lot of groups which you mentioned, like Lashkar and Ansar and all that. They were supported by some people in Pakistan, not necessarily by government by then at that time, but there is debate about that. I don't have direct evidence, so I say allegedly supported by Pakistani government, or not the government, but the agencies or the state or establishment, whatever you want to call it. And but they were also basically supported by people in the valley, like Lashkar and others. They had local support as well, not necessarily because they kind of subscribed to their ideology or politics, but because they thought they were fighting for them. And that mindset that somebody is fighting for you when you are enslaved or subjugated or exploited or occupied or whatever you want to call it, then obviously can cause issues and can be abused. And I think the Pakistani rulers did abuse this attachment with the religion and with Pakistan. But obviously now it's very clear that this struggle, which were initially by the people for their own independence, was quickly hijacked and controlled and steered towards the interest of Pakistani rulers, or maybe the interest for people who are above them, the world powers, rather than for the independence of Kashmiri people or their rights.
Mr. Shams, the NIA, the National Investigation Agency of India, is seeking, death penalty against separatist leader and chief of Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front, Yasin Malik, in a terror funding case. And, his wife, Mishal Hussain, she tweeted lately that you covered Modi. Your regime is the biggest sinner of humanity, but we won't ever bow down to you. Your cages only lock the human flesh. Never can they subdue our manic state. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, one aspect is that the people who are fighting for the independence of Kashmir against the Indian and Pakistani occupation, they always were branded as anti-state, Indian agent, Pakistani agent. Makbul Bhatt, when he was arrested after Ganga hijacking in 1971-2, he was presented in a court and he said if liberation struggles or struggles for freedom or the will for freedom was to be stopped by court decisions, there wouldn't have been many free nations in the world today. So courts always are used by the rulers to suppress the struggles for independence and liberation. Same, India is doing same. They're not doing anything different. They hanged Makbul Bhatt in 1984 for the same crime. And but then there is other aspect that when, like I said, when struggles are hijacked and used and abused, then they become very complicated, and that's what happened with Kashmir. Yasin Malik, who is head of Jammu Kashmir Liberation Front, they put down gun in 1994. And after that, he been part of many Indian civil society functions across India, and had meetings with the prime ministers and ministers and all
Yeah.
people of the Indian state and society. But now when the BJP came to power, because BJP is like a fascistic party, and it is their agenda to basically capture whole of Kashmir. That is what their manifesto pledge. So so when they came to power second time with a bigger majority, they did that, and they eroded the autonomy of Jammu Kashmir, which was provided to them based on the accession document. So that is one aspect. The other aspect is that Pakistanis always use Kashmiri sentiment for their own interest, to strengthen their hegemony over Kashmir on this side and the valley. Ideological, and this thought, many people have this, that Pakistan is fighting for the freedom of Kashmir.
Yeah.
And so Pakistan is using that situation. And I personally think Mishal Malik and other people, who obviously she's his wife and she has a daughter, and they have that, of course, desperation. They want Yasin Malik out. But I think she's either deliberately or unknowingly also damaging the struggle he is part of. And so she's strengthening the Pakistani grip rather than, excuse me, rather than supporting, the unconditional self-determination. She does not have to support independent Kashmir if she does not believe in it, but she can support unconditional right of people to decide. So there are a lot of politicking and politics, of course, going on, and that makes things very, very complicated. And Yasin Malik also did not defend himself, knowing that he won't get justice from Indian state. But I think Makbul Bhatt, when he was arrested in Ganga hijacking case by Pakistan, he defended himself, and he also defended in the Indian courts. But obviously, I mean, I am not a lawyer, so I don't know exactly, and I don't have the case file. Some people did ask for it, and I asked for a lot of people, but I couldn't get it. So that's unfortunate, because otherwise maybe there are lawyers in the world who can do something about it. But it's very strange that we don't have any real case file. And I don't know whether it's too late now, but I hope and wish that sense will prevail, and Indian government and the people who are obviously sitting on the chair to do justice, they will know the political motives and political context of this case, rather than the nitty-gritty that is used to kind of take Yasin Malik to the gallows, to the death.
Yeah.
That's
We hope the
sad.
same. So, Mr. Shams, what were the outcomes of the G20 summit that took place in India? The residents and the experts on the Kashmir issue, accused that this controversial event was, it took place to project a normalcy in the region. So, how true is that?
Yeah, it's true that is what it was aimed to be used for. And I obviously, as a state subject, I think the Indian and Pakistani presence in Kashmir is illegal now, because they promised that they will withdraw their forces and they will let people to decide. They have not. So they basically breached the international obligation, legal obligation. So when you do that, theoretically, you become illegal. So though both are illegal in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. But obviously, both try to use different tactics to convince local people and the world that we are doing something good for people. Pakistanis are doing this since 1950s, when they abrogated the Article 35A in Gilgit-Baltistan, that is state subject regulation. And India has done that on 5th of August 2019. And since then, India is trying to portray to the local population, their vote bank, and the world that our strategy in Kashmir is working, and Kashmir is peaceful now. There is no resistance. There were only handful people who were backed by Pakistan, and now we have sorted them out. And these autonomous status was a hurdle between India and Kashmir to come together and the further development of Kashmir. And this is Indian narrative they wanted to present. They are presenting, and G20 was, of course, one big kind of event to show the world that Kashmir is normal. But I think it fired back, because when China said, we're not going, we're not attending, because it's a disputed area. And when Turkey said the same, and when other nations who went there reluctantly, but they all know that this is disputed, and India is trying to do to show that it's part of India. So, and I think it became more internationalized than India would have liked. And it is obviously up to people now how they counter these tactics, these diplomatic and economic maneuvers to kind of encounter them and challenge them around the world, which is a big job.
So we are running short of time. My last question from you would be that, what do you think, what is a long-term and sustainable solution to this conflict, and what do the people of Kashmir want?
Yeah, well, obviously, this is my personal view, and it's formed after about 30 years of kind of being part of it, studying it, talking to people, learning, unlearning, relearning, whatever. And the gist of that is that currently Kashmir is under 5 administrative kind of structures.
Really?
Indian and Pakistani, and then under that there is Azad Kashmir, Gilgit-Baltistan, and Indian J&K, and now additional one, Ladakh, separate from J&K. But there is, from people, there is demands in Gilgit-Baltistan, in Jammu, and in Ladakh for many decades now, that we want our regional assemblies. Like there is one in AJK, there is one in Valley, but the Valley one is also included Jammu and Ladakh, but Jammu and Ladakh wanted their own. So 5 regional assemblies, I think, if India and Pakistan understand that this situation, this status quo is not going to continue. Actually, it's linked with the wider national question in South Asia. And obviously, that this approach by Indian and Pakistani state currently, which is to suppress and silence people, obviously is not going to work. Because how many people you can silence? How many people you can arrest? How many people you can kill? It continues, and it comes in some other form and shape. So this is not going to work. They have to be sensible and think in long term, and create an environment where people in all these 5 regions should have their own autonomous assemblies. They elect people without the fear of Indian or Pakistani armies around, and in the presence of international observers and international media. And those assemblies then should have mandate to negotiate what India needs from Kashmir, what Pakistan needs, And what China needs, of course, China is also a very big stakeholder now in that region. Although China
Yeah.
does not claim the entire state. India and Pakistan claim the
Mm.
entire state. China does not do that. But China is a
Mm.
stakeholder. So I think, it has to be a democratic solution by the people of all regions. This rhetoric that Jammu Kashmir state people should decide the future of the entire state, I think it is maybe it can be justified on legal grounds that the right of self-determination is for the entire state. But after 75 years, 80 years, this people who projected this narrative within state, they could not engage Jammu, Ladakh, and Gilgit-Baltistan people. Their grip on their societies with this current political ideology is not as strong as it looks. There are serious questions within India about the domination of certain group of population or group of ruling elite on the whole of India. And now when BJP is kind of peddling or promoting this idea that there should be one language, I think that is how other speakers of other languages will take this. I don't know. Time will tell. And same happened in Pakistan. And they still, there are issues of regions and provinces. Obviously, the deep down issue is inequality and this the government, the structures, particularly in Pakistan, the structure is so much dominated by feudal and army kind of this people who are using religion for politics. It is also causing problems. So both states have these serious issues, and obviously within international context, both are important and being used for wider interests of imperialism or colonialism or neo-colonialism, whatever you want to call it. So then I think if only wise that sensible people in all the regions and states, they resolve they address these issues and focus on economic development and people's prosperity and rights, and this war and terror can become war for development, and obviously it's between those who are enjoying and making goods out of war and those who want a peaceful world. So it's not just Kashmir, it's the world over thing.
Exactly. It's all over the world, whether you talk about Israel or you talk about, Afghanistan or Kashmir. And I think so Kashmiri issue is, very complicated. It's a power game. It's a blame game. And, now people are also divided. So, but thank you so much, Mr. Shamas. It was great to have you. You explained everything in detail. And we can only wish, peace and prosperity to the beautiful region of Kashmir. Thank you so much.
And the South
Faria
Asia and South Asia.
Exactly.
We all are linked. We all are not enemies of each other, but we are made to think like that.
Yeah. Thank you so much.